The tear that traced a path through the dust on Sophia Miller's cheek wasn't from sadness. It was a baptism of fire, a salty testament to the glorious, punishing heat of pure capsaicin. "I can't believe it," she whispered, her voice a hoarse rasp, her breath catching in her throat. To think of flavor this intense, this alive, could exist. For 13 years, she had been a devout pilgrim at the altar of Mexican cuisine, relentless chaser of the dragon's breath found only in the most remote corners of Oaxaca, in salsas so potent they were spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. The holy trinity of her faith was chili, smoke, and agave. Everything else was just noise. She had heard the stories, of course, from her friends and culinary guides in Mexico, tales of the Colossus to the north. The United States, one wizened mescalero had scoffed, swirling the spirit in his clay capita. "There is no food there. Only factories. The people are loud. They take our food and make it plastic." Sophia, a Canadian food blogger whose entire identity was built on the pursuit of authenticity, had absorbed these pronouncements as gospel. The United States was a culinary void, a land of industrial fast food, arrogant people, and dangerous, soulless cities. Her husband, David, who regarded a sprinkle of black pepper as an act of aggression, needed even less convincing. For him, every trip south of the Canadian border was a trial by fire, a forced march through a gauntlet of flavors he couldn't stand and a culture he found chaotic. Honestly, Sophia, he'd grumble over a lukewarm cerveza, his safe choice in a sea of smoky mezcal. "I'm done with this part of the world. All of it. Next time, we're going to Scotland. They boil everything. It's perfect." Sophia had always agreed. The U.S. held no appeal. Why trade the vibrant, hand-pressed soul of a Oaxacan tortilla for a shrink-wrapped burger bun? Why abandon the complex, earthy fire of a habanero for the bland sweetness of ketchup? The United States, in her mind, wasn't just a different country. It was the antithesis of everything she held sacred about food. And so, when a chance encounter in a dusty Oaxacan alley led to an earnest invitation from a friendly American woman, Sophia and David were, to put it mildly, reluctant. Yet a single taste of a dish they initially mistook for garbage, a blackened, crusty piece of meat that looked utterly ruined, would not just change their minds. It would detonate their entire worldview, a 180-degree turn in the story of their lives. Sophia Miller's quest was for a specific kind of pain, the kind that blossoms on the tongue and radiates outward, a heat so profound it quiets the mind and focuses the senses. Standard issue jalapenos were child's play. For her, the essence of a dish was its ability to push her to the edge. It was in the back streets of Oaxaca that she found her nirvana. The street vendors with their searing salsas, the smoky depths of a good mole negro, the fiery kiss of chiltepin peppers. And the perfect companion to this ecstatic pain was mezcal, the wild spirit of the agave. The way its smoky, vegetal sweetness cleansed her palate after a chilly onslaught was a symphony, a perfect, beautiful balance. She could find some of it back home in Toronto, of course, but the selection was a pale imitation. So, for over a decade, her compass had pointed south, a recurring pilgrimage to the heart of Mexico. 13 years of chasing the heat. David, however, saw things differently. To him, these trips were exercises in endurance. "The streets are filthy, Sophia," he'd complain, carefully wiping down their table at a street-side stall. "And everyone is yelling. And the food, it's just one note. Hot. I'm tired of it." His aversion wasn't just about the spice. It was a deeper prejudice, a neatly constructed wall of negativity he'd built around the entire continent south of his own country. Each trip, each bout of heartburn, simply added another brick to that wall. In his mind, authentic just meant uncomfortable, and spicy was a synonym for suffering. Sophia's own prejudice, while more focused, was just as rigid. It was aimed squarely at their other neighbor, the United States. The stories she'd collected from her Mexican friends painted a grim picture. "American food has no soul," a chef in Puebla told her once. "They have no respect for ingredients. The cities are cold, made of concrete and steel, not life, another lamented. And the people they think they are the center of the world. Over 13 years, these refrains had solidified from opinion into fact. To Sophia, the idea of a culinary trip to the US was absurd, a contradiction in terms. America had no ghost peppers, no ancient strains of maize, no generations of traditions simmering in a pot. America, she believed with the certainty of an expert, had nothing to offer her. The world's greatest food was here, in the sun-drenched, chili-infused heart of Mexico. The encounter that would change everything began, as many of Sophia's best adventures did, with her getting hopelessly lost. She was chasing a rumor, a whisper of a legendary, family-distilled Pachuga mezcal, made in a way that defied modern methods. The pursuit led her deep into a labyrinth of nameless cobblestone alleys, the vibrant sounds of the main square fading behind her. David, trailing reluctantly, had paused to photograph a colonial-era church, and in the throng of a local market, they were separated. One moment, Sophia was intoxicated by the sensory overload, the scent of toasted spices, the riot of colorful textiles, the rhythmic slap of hands shaping masa. The next, a profound sense of dislocation set in. The familiar alleys twisted into an unrecognizable knot. She reached for her phone to call David, only to find the screen black, the battery dead. A flicker of panic, cold and sharp, cut through the Oaxacan heat. The vibrant chaos she loved suddenly felt menacing, alienating. It was then that a woman approached her. "You look a little lost," she said in clear, unaccented English, a gentle smile on her face. Sophia, expecting to struggle with her broken Spanish, felt the wave of relief. "I am," Sophia admitted. "I've gotten separated from my husband. A tall, white guy, looks completely out of his element." The woman's smile widened. I think I saw him, pacing by the fountain near the Templo de Santo Domingo." He looked concerned. She gestured down a narrow street. "It's this way. I can walk you over if you like." Before Sophia could properly thank her, the woman was already leading the way. She's incredibly nice for a local, Sophia thought, then mentally corrected herself based on years of experience. This level of proactive kindness was unusual. During their short walk, through snippets of conversation, Sophia's assumption was proven wrong. "I'm actually from the States," the woman said, introducing herself as Sarah. She worked for a fair trade company sourcing artisanal crafts and foods, which brought her to Oaxaca frequently. Sophia's mind stuttered. An American. The words she'd heard for years, arrogant, loud, insincere, flashed in her head. But the woman walking beside her, Sarah, was the opposite of that stereotype. She was calm, warm, and genuinely helpful. The dissonance was unsettling. Sarah led her directly to the fountain, where David was, indeed, pacing frantically. His relief at seeing Sophia was palpable. Overjoyed, Sophia insisted on treating their savior to a meal at her favorite hole-in-the-wall restaurant, a place renowned for its face-meltingly hot salsa machu and a staggering selection of local mezcal. Over a table laden with smoky tlayudas and succulent barbacoa, the three of them talked. Sarah, it turned out, was intimately familiar with the local food scene, even recommending a few hidden gems Sophia had never heard of. Within half an hour, the easy conversation had dissolved the awkwardness of their meeting, and they felt like old friends. Sophia explained her passion, her blog, her belief that Mexico was the pinnacle of culinary adventure. Sarah listened, her expression thoughtful. When Sophia finished, she leaned forward, her gaze serious. "Sophia, you've traveled all over the world, and you clearly love North America's food culture. Have you ever considered visiting the States?" The question hung in the air. Sophia hesitated, searching for a polite way to articulate her deep-seated disdain. To tell this kind woman that she considered her home country a gastronomic wasteland felt cruel. "Well," Sophia began carefully, "I've heard the food is milder. I'm really into intense flavors, you know? And honestly, I've become so obsessed with Mexico, I haven't really thought about anywhere else." she added as an afterthought. Plus, I hear it's a bit of a political mess right now. Sarah listened without interruption. When Sophia trailed off, she nodded slowly. I understand, she said, her voice gentle. But isn't that all the more reason to come and see for yourself? So many things you only learn by experiencing them firsthand. Sophia felt a pang of confusion. Sarah continued, a faint trace of sadness in her eyes. It's true, some American food is mild. But not all of it. There are regional cuisines, traditions, and flavors you wouldn't believe. We have spice. We have amazing liquor. I think you'd find dishes you'd love, Sophia. She sighed softly. I hear what people say about us, especially down here. But most of the time, the people talking have never met an American, never set foot in one of our cities. They're just repeating stories. She looked directly at Sophia, her invitation both a challenge and a plea. If you're ever willing to take a chance, I would love to show you my home. Austin, Texas. I'll be your personal guide. We'll eat, we'll drink, you'll see the real America. The idea was so foreign, so contrary to Sophia's entire belief system. She glanced at David, who looked horrified. No more trips to this continent, he said a little too bluntly. But Sarah just smiled at him. David, I especially want you to try our food. There are so many incredible dishes that have zero chili heat. I promise you would love it. David looked skeptical, but he was also a man who couldn't let his wife travel alone to a place he deemed unsafe. He knew if Sophia decided to go, he would have to follow. A silent negotiation passed between them. Ultimately, to Sophia's own surprise, she found herself agreeing. The sincerity in Sarah's eyes, the quiet dignity with which she defended her home, had planted a seed of doubt in Sophia's mind. Maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong. When you decide to come, just let me know, Sarah said, her face lighting up. They exchanged numbers. I'll be waiting for you at the Austin airport. As they parted ways, Sophia's heart was a tangle of excitement and dread. Was everything she'd heard about the U.S. a lie? Or was Sarah the exception, and the country was just as bad as everyone claimed? There was only one way to find out. What if the food is all spicy again? David muttered as they walked back to their hotel. Sarah said there are non-spicy things, Sophia replied, more to convince herself than him. And besides, as a food blogger, I can't just operate on prejudice. I have to see for myself. In truth, she was terrified. What if the trip was a massive disappointment? What if it was exactly the soulless, boring place she'd always imagined? But overriding the fear was a spark of professional curiosity, ignited by Sarah's genuine warmth. Perhaps the United States wasn't what she thought it was. It was a tiny sliver of hope, but it was enough. Their journey to Texas was set, a trip that would mark the beginning of a profound change in both their lives. The months leading up to the trip were filled with a low-grade hum of anxiety. Sophia and Sarah corresponded frequently by email, planning a loose itinerary centered around Austin, Sarah's hometown in the heart of Texas. The day before their departure, Sophia fell into a rabbit hole of online research, a decision she immediately regretted. The search results seemed to conspire to confirm her worst fears. She found blog posts from other international travelers complaining about American food, calling it bland, processed, and monotonous. Forum threads were filled with bitter arguments about politics and rants about the hollow nature of American consumer culture. The people are fake and the food has no taste, one comment read. Better than the Chinese, read another. With every click, Sophia's apprehension grew. Maybe this is a huge mistake. David, conducting his own grim research, wasn't helping. Did you know the crime rate in most major U.S. cities as well? You don't want to know, he announced, peering over his laptop. And look at this, a list of the most common scams targeting tourists. They packed their bags with the grim determination of people preparing for an expedition into a hostile wilderness. When they landed at Austin Bergstrom International Airport, the air was thick with a humid, Texan warmth. They walked toward the arrival's gate, scanning the crowd, their guards up. And then they saw her. Sarah stood about 100 feet away, waving, a smile so genuinely bright it seemed to cut through their layers of cynicism. "Welcome to Texas," she exclaimed, hugging them both. The first surprise came on the drive from the airport. David had steeled himself for a journey through a concrete jungle of strip malls and interchanges. Instead, Sarah took a scenic route that wound through the rolling, green landscape of the Texas hill country. Ancient, sprawling live oak trees shaded the road, and the skyline of Austin in the distance was a quirky mix of gleaming modern towers and funky, low-slung buildings. Sarah pointed out iconic music venues, independent bookshops, and walls covered in vibrant, sprawling murals. This wasn't the uniform, gray America of David's imagination. He leaned forward from the back seat, his eyes wide with a flicker of genuine interest, the gloomy expression he'd worn since they left Toronto slowly dissolving. Sophia watched him, astonished. Her Asia-hating husband was captivated by the Texan landscape. Still, Sophia remained guarded. Pretty scenery was one thing, but the real test was the food. "I'm taking you to one of my favorite places for dinner," Sarah announced. "It's a great introduction to modern Texan cuisine." The restaurant wasn't the greasy spoon barbecue shack Sophia had pictured. It was a beautifully restored stone building with a chic, minimalist interior warmed by accents of reclaimed wood and local art. The moment they stepped inside, a host greeted them with a professional, easy warmth. They were led to their table, and Sophia couldn't help but notice the details: the immaculate cleanliness, the fresh air circulating, the soft buzz of happy conversation. This was a world away from the sticky tables and chaotic service she'd often encountered on her travels, experiences she'd romanticized as authentic. She glanced at David and saw her own shock mirrored in his face. He was staring, dumbfounded, at the polished silverware and crisp linen napkin. This was a level of thoughtful hospitality neither of them had ever experienced. The menus were presented, and their server, a young man with an encyclopedic knowledge of the restaurant's offerings, walked them through the specials. He spoke about the local farms where they sourced their vegetables, the ranch that provided their beef, the story behind each dish. It was all so intentional, so full of care. For Sophia and David, whose previous travels had taught them to expect a certain level of grime and indifference as a trade-off for good food, the experience was profoundly disorienting. Every preconceived notion they held about America, that it was careless, impersonal, and low quality, was being systematically dismantled before they had even taken a single bite. The kardzu on their table in Taiwan, the meticulously chosen silverware here. The chopsticks she knew from China were long and functional, but the ones in Taiwan had felt different, crafted with a subtle elegance. Here, too, the weight of the fork in her hand felt considered, balanced. Sarah had even thought to ask the restaurant to have a full selection of non-alcoholic craft cocktails ready for David. The thoughtfulness was staggering. The foundation of their prejudice was cracking, and dinner hadn't even started yet. Then, the first dish arrived, and it threatened to cement their worst fears all over again. "I ordered us an appetizer to share," Sarah said cheerfully. "It's a local specialty. Brisket burn ends." The server placed a small, rustic cast-iron dish in the center of the table. Inside were irregular, blackened chunks of meat. They looked charred, dry, and utterly unappetizing. To Sophia's eye, they looked like a mistake, scraps from the bottom of a roasting pan that should have been thrown away. David physically recoiled, his face a mask of dismay. "Is this a joke?" Sophia thought, a wave of disappointment washing over her. Did she really bring us all this way to eat incinerated leftovers? As if sensing their horror, Sarah's smile never wavered. She picked up a small fork. "Trust me on this," she said. Feeling cornered, bound by politeness, Sophia speared one of the smaller, less jarred-looking pieces. She examined it. It felt hard, like jerky. She brought it to her nose, expecting the acrid smell of burnt carbon. Instead, she was met with an impossibly complex aroma of wood smoke, black pepper, and something deeply, mysteriously savory, like caramelized sugar. Her curiosity piqued. She decided to take the plunge. She placed the morsel in her mouth. The world stopped. The crispy, almost brittle outer bark, the part that looked so ruined, shattered between her teeth, releasing a flavor so intense it made her eyes water. It was an explosion of smoke, spice, and salt, a concentrated essence of everything good about fire and meat. But immediately following that crunch was a texture that defied logic. The meat beneath the bark wasn't dry. It was impossibly, luxuriously tender, melting on her tongue in a wave of rendered beef fat and profound, smoky flavor. It was rustic and primal, yet as complex and nuanced as the finest French charcuterie. In that single, mind-altering bite, 13 years of prejudice, a worldview built on second-hand stories and culinary arrogance, evaporated into smoke. She looked up, her mouth still full, and saw David staring at her, his fork hovering hesitantly over the dish. Her expression must have been something to behold, because without a word, he cautiously took a piece for himself. He chewed slowly, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then his eyes widened. A look of pure, unadulterated shock spread across his face. He, David, the man who hated bold flavors, the man for whom food was merely fuel, was having a revelation. This wasn't about chilly heat. It was a different kind of intensity, a deep, resonant, savory chord that vibrated through his entire being. "What is this?" he managed to ask, his voice filled with awe. Sarah beamed. She launched into a passionate explanation of the art of Texas barbecue, the long, slow smoking process over post oak wood, the science of the Maillard reaction that creates the flavorful bark, and how the burnt ends, cut from the fattier point of the brisket, were a prized delicacy. Not a mistake. Sophia listened mesmerized. She realized with a humbling clarity that she knew nothing. There was a deep, rich, and complex culinary tradition here, a craft honed over generations that she had arrogantly dismissed without a second thought. The rest of the meal was a continuation of this delicious education. A perfectly pan-seared Gulf red snapper arrived for David, its skin crispy, its flesh flaky and moist, served with a delicate citrus butter sauce that made him close his eyes in pleasure. For Sophia, Sarah ordered a flight of high-end Texas bourbons. The smoky, caramel, and vanilla notes, the smooth, lingering warmth, impressed her so deeply that she found herself comparing them favorably to her beloved artisanal mezcals. Each dish, each sip, was another chisel chipping away at the stone wall of their prejudice until nothing was left but rubble. By the time dessert was cleared, Sophia felt emotionally raw, her mind reeling. They sat in a comfortable silence for a long moment before she finally found her voice. "Sarah," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "I've been an ignorant fool." Tears welled in her eyes, not of fire this time, but of shame and gratitude. As a food writer, my whole job is to be open, to explore, to tell the truth. And I've been spreading lies. I just repeated what I heard without ever trying to find out for myself. I am so sorry. David, looking humbled, nodded in agreement. I was the same. I thought this entire country was one giant strip mall with a McDonald's on every corner. That was one of the best meals of my entire life. Sarah reached across the table and patted Sophia's hand. Her expression wasn't triumphant. It was understanding. "Don't be so hard on yourselves," she said softly. "It's easy to believe the stories. We're neighbors, but sometimes it feels like we live in different worlds. Politics, the media, they make it easy to forget that we're all just people trying to make beautiful things, whether it's in a kitchen in Oaxaca or a smokehouse in Austin." She looked at them both, her sincerity shining. Yes, America has industrial food. And we have our share of problems. But that's not the whole story. The real story is here, in places like this. You just have to be willing to look for it. That dinner was the beginning. They spent the next week with Sarah as their guide, not as tourists, but as explorers. They discovered the vibrant ecosystem of Austin's food trucks, eating transcendent breakfast tacos and innovative Asian fusion. They drank craft beer in sprawling, dog-friendly beer gardens. They listened to live music in legendary, divey clubs, feeling the city's creative soul. Everywhere they went, they were met with a laid-back, genuine friendliness that utterly defied the stereotype of the arrogant American. On their last night, sitting on the patio of a brewery, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sophia felt a profound shift within herself. Her blog had always been about chasing authentic flavors, but she now realized her definition of authentic had been far too narrow. She had a new purpose. She wasn't just going to write about food anymore. She was going to write about connection, about breaking down the walls of prejudice that keep people from discovering the beauty in their own backyards. Back in Toronto, the first thing Sophia did was begin to write. The words flowed out of her, not just a review of a restaurant, but the story of a journey from ignorance to understanding. Her post, titled, "Everything I Thought I Knew About America Was Wrong," went viral. It was filled with pictures of brisket, of murals, of the smiling face of their friend, Sarah. The comments poured in from her readers around the world. "You've inspired me to visit," one wrote. "I had the same prejudice. Thank you for changing my mind." So, those stories from Mexico were just stories? David, meanwhile, was on the internet for a different reason. He was researching smokers. He was determined to learn how to recreate the magic of that Texas brisket. The man who once saw food as a threat was now captivated by its power. Sophia's love for Mexico hadn't diminished, but her world had expanded. She understood now that culinary greatness wasn't a competition. The delicate, artful cuisine of Austin didn't negate the rustic fire of Oaxaca. It complemented it. She realized that the most important ingredient in any meal wasn't spice or technique, but an open heart. Her friendship with Sarah became a cherished, permanent part of their lives. For Sophia and David, travel was no longer about escaping, but about discovering. The United States was no longer a void on their map, but a vast, diverse, and delicious landscape waiting to be explored. They had set out on a journey expecting to confirm their biases, but instead, they had found the truth, that the best flavors and the most meaningful connections are often found in the places you least expect.